At an ordinary airport checkpoint, something extraordinary went wrong. Sergeant Major Thomas Tom Stone, a 70-year-old decorated war veteran, was simply trying to board a flight to Washington, D.C. for a ceremony honoring wounded warriors. Instead, he found himself humiliated in public by a TSA agent who saw his prosthetic leg not as a sign of sacrifice, but as a potential threat. The agent, young and full of authority, loudly demanded that Tom remove his advanced prosthetic for additional screening. Tom calmly explained the medical complexity and necessity of the limb, but his words were met with mocking skepticism. "Rules are rules, hero," the agent sneered. The insult landed hard. Despite carrying medical documentation and offering to undergo alternative screening procedures, ones he had experienced countless times before, Tom was denied dignity. Forced into a curtained-off cubicle under the gaze of impatient air travelers, he was treated not as a veteran, but as a suspect. His identity, his sacrifice, and his humanity were brushed aside by a system that failed to recognize who stood before it. This wasn't about security, it was about tone, treatment, and respect. Tom, who had lost his leg to an IED while serving his country, deserved understanding, not suspicion. The act of asking a man to disassemble his own body in public was a painful betrayal. But what hurt even more was the casual cruelty of those who should have protected his dignity. That day, Tom wasn't just a passenger. He was a test of how we treat our heroes when no one's watching. And it was a test that, at that moment, our system failed. Sergeant Major Thomas Stone sat in the cramped secondary screening cubicle, his pulse steady despite the turmoil inside. The pain of the situation wasn't just physical, it was the sting of indignity, the echo of past wounds reopened in the most public and humiliating way. A man who had faced down enemy fire without flinching now found himself treated as a threat in the very country he had sacrificed so much to protect. The TSA agent's sneer, the dismissive tone, the insinuation that his prosthetic might be used to conceal something illicit, it all gnawed at Tom's core. As he sat alone, the synthetic fibers of the travel chair biting into his skin, Tom remembered the small laminated card in his wallet. It was a backup plan he'd hoped never to use, an emergency contact number provided by the Wounded Warrior Project. It connected directly to a Department of Defense liaison tasked with responding to critical incidents involving veteran dignity. Taking a deep breath, Tom dialed the number. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and immediately attentive. Once Tom had provided his details and described the situation, there was no hesitation. "Sergeant Major Stone, please remain where you are. Do not remove your prosthetic. This incident is being escalated under Code Red protocol. Expect immediate response." Tom felt a strange calm settle over him as he ended the call. He didn't know what a Code Red meant exactly, but the authority in that voice told him that wheels were turning. Outside the cubicle, Agent Miller rapped sharply on the curtain. "You done in there yet, pal? Clock's ticking." Tom didn't respond. Another minute passed. Miller knocked again, louder this time. "I'm calling a supervisor if you don't come out right now." Then just as the tension peaked, the atmosphere shifted. The ambient noise of the bustling checkpoint dimmed as footsteps, measured, powerful, approached. The curtain was swept aside. In front of Tom stood a sharply dressed woman flanked by two men in suits. "Sergeant Major Stone?" she asked, her voice both respectful and firm. "I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary Carlson from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary is here and would like to speak with you." Tom blinked. The Secretary? As in the Secretary of Defense? He rose slowly, still unsure if he was dreaming, and followed Carlson out of the cubicle. The bustling checkpoint was frozen. Passengers and TSA agents alike stood in stunned silence. Then Tom saw him. General James Jim Harrison, Secretary of Defense, standing tall in the center of the chaos. A four-star general, a man Tom had once briefed. As Tom approached, General Harrison's face softened. "Tom," he said, clasping his hand with a firm grip, To demand that a combat amputee remove a complex prosthetic in public is not protocol. It's an outrage." He addressed the entire checkpoint. Passengers and staff NA's agents and travelers scrambled to follow the sudden shutdown. General Harrison turned back to Tom. "My plane is waiting. Tom, stunned, nodded. This moment of justice, so swift, so powerful, felt like a deep exhale after years of holding breath. As Sergeant Major Thomas Stone followed General Harrison through the silent airport, the hush was surreal. The once busy TSA checkpoint was now a scene of total suspension. No bins clattered, no boarding announcements rang out, just the echo of authoritative boots and the occasional stunned murmur from onlookers. General Harrison walked with purpose, flanked by members of his Pentagon security detail. Tom, steadying his gait with his prosthetic, tried to process the gravity of what was unfolding around him. The humiliation he had endured minutes earlier was now transforming into something unexpected, a very public, very powerful reckoning. Agent Miller, now stripped of his usual swagger, stood rigid beside Supervisor Jenkins, who looked as if she had aged 10 years in 5 minutes. Neither dared speak. The Secretary of Defense halted directly in front of them. "Agent Miller," Harrison said, his voice level but sharp enough to slice steel, "you are hereby suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending termination following full investigation by Homeland Security and the TSA Inspector General." He turned to Jenkins. "Supervisor Jenkins, your gross negligence and failure to follow federal disability protocol also warrants immediate suspension. Your entire unit will undergo retraining conducted by my department. You are now relieved of duty." Gasps rippled through the checkpoint. Cameras emerged from pockets, travelers capturing what felt like history in the making. TSA officers looked shell-shocked, unsure whether to salute or vanish. Then airport security arrived to assist with the formal relief of duty, escorting both Miller and Jenkins away for debrief and removal. Harrison wasn't finished. He turned to the nearest TSA agent and said, "Reroute all checkpoint operations immediately. This station is closed until it can be rebuilt to meet the standards this nation's defenders deserve. No veteran should be humiliated like this, not on my watch." Within minutes, agents were rerouting passengers to nearby checkpoints. Flight delays were announced, but no one complained. The air was thick with a strange collective awe. This wasn't just bureaucratic correction. It was a thunderous response to a quiet injustice. Tom remained quiet as he watched the scene unfold. He hadn't asked for this, not the confrontation, not the attention, certainly not the shutdown of an entire terminal. But seeing a man of such high authority take his humiliation seriously stirred something deep within him. After years of feeling like a footnote, this moment whispered, "You matter." Escorted to a private lounge, Tom was offered water and medical attention while General Harrison handled media inquiries. Reporters had already caught wind of the shutdown. A Pentagon press officer arrived, coordinating statements and emphasizing the DoD's firm stance on veteran dignity. Then Harrison returned to Tom, his posture still bristling with righteous anger, but his tone gentle. "You handled yourself with dignity, Sergeant Major. I only wish our systems had done the same." Tom nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir. I just wanted to make it to Walter Reed. That was all." "You still will," Harrison said. "You'll arrive not as someone sidelined, but as someone honored." As they walked to the waiting military jet, a sleek government aircraft prepped and ready, Tom glanced back at the checkpoint one last time. The pain he'd felt earlier hadn't vanished, but it had been countered, not by vengeance, but by validation. By the time they boarded, media outlets had already picked up the headline, "TSA agent suspended after humiliating." Across the country, talk shows debated TSA policies. Social media erupted. While Thomas Stone had become more than just a name, he was now a symbol, a reluctant one, but a meaningful one. And he was on his way to Walter Reed, not with shame, but as a man reclaimed by the very country he'd served. The fallout from what occurred at TSA Checkpoint Bravo rippled across the nation within hours. As Sergeant Major Thomas Stone sat comfortably aboard the Secretary of Defense's private jet, heading to Walter Reed Medical Center, the very agency General James Harrison, never one to let injustice go unchallenged, didn't back at the airport, Agent Miller had been taken aside by federal investigators. His smug demeanor had vanished. Sitting in a private interrogation room, he found himself confronted with video footage of the incident, multiple passenger complaints, and federal disability law violations. Every word he'd spoken, mocking Tom's prosthetic, insinuating criminality, was on record. There was no room for spin. Miller was suspended without pay, pending formal termination, and warned that civil penalties or even prosecution under the Americans with Disabilities Act could follow. Supervisor Jenkins did not fare much better. Her failure to intervene, her dismissal of a veteran's valid medical and federal documentation, and her comp. While the bureaucracy moved swiftly, public opinion moved even faster. A bystander's phone video of the incident went viral overnight. Within hours, it dominated news cycles. TSA agent shames decorated amputee veteran, read one headline. Cable news shows invited military advocates and former service members to weigh in. Even high-profile public figures, some veterans themselves, posted messages of support. Tom Stone is a hero, one congressman tweeted, that by the time Tom reached Walter Reed, he was stunned to find a small honor guard waiting on the tarmac and a crowd of supporters gathered just beyond the terminal. The event organizers had been briefed on what had happened. I didn't lose my leg so I could be pitied. In the days that followed, real reforms took root. The TSA Secretary Harrison wasn't done. He called a joint press conference with the heads of TSA and the Department of Veterans Affairs for Tom Stone. The experience had started with humiliation but ended in vindication. Though reluctant at first to become the center of attention, he realized his ordeal had helped force a reckoning that had long been overdue. Weeks after the Walter Reed event, Sergeant Major Thomas Stone settled back into his quiet life in upstate New York. The media attention faded, but something deeper remained, a sense that, for once, the system had listened. In the mail came dozens more letters. Some were from veterans who had faced similar humiliations and now found the courage to speak up. Others were from TSA agents, newly trained you. That letter brought tears to Tom's eyes. He hadn't set out to make headlines. All he wanted that the Secretary of Defense, General Harrison, kept in touch. True to his word, he continued championing the Veteran Dignity and Security Program across federal agencies. Tom was even invited to help draft further guidelines. Quietly behind the one evening, Tom sat on his porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. His prosthetic leg ached in the cooling air, but he felt peace. Sometimes dignity isn't something you demand with shouts. It's something you reclaim by standing tall, even when others try to diminish you. Sergeant Major Thomas Stone's story reminds us all that respect for our veterans isn't optional. It's a sacred duty. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word respect below. Share this video with someone who needs to subscribe to our channel, because every hero deserves to be seen, heard, and honored. Always.